It seems like every TikTok influencer, your work colleagues, and even your mum has an opinion on what the best skincare product or routine is for you. So I decided to ask the real experts in skin to share unbiased, science and fact-based answers to your most common questions. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by breakouts, rosacea, or the endless parade of must-have products, this episode is for you. I've pulled together the most powerful tips and advice around skin and what impacts it, from hormones to sleep, stress and nutrition, and how to choose the products that are the best bet without wasting time, money, or putting your skin at risk. You'll hear from Dr. Ryan de Cruz, Professor Greg Goodman, Dr. Ginni Mansber, Richard Parker, Chisa Westcar, and me as we break down exactly what your skin needs to thrive at any age. Let's get into it. Obviously, there is no Mrs. Average, perimenopausal or menopausal patient, but what I'd love us to talk to now is what are the kind of minimum things that you think need to be in a routine? So, for example, I saw a patient, and I did talk about this earlier recently, who was a doctor actually, and she was still washing her face with soap. And she told me that at medical school, they were told that actually soap and water was fine on your skin, and we had a bit of a giggle about it. She did say, oh, it was Dove soap, and I was like, that's not making it any better for me. So what are the kind of minimum things generally that you would like to see someone maybe who's not done very much with the skin? Because I think there's definitely the skincare aficionados who absolutely are obsessed with skincare, but I actually think there's a silent majority of women who kind of don't even know where to begin. Maybe their mum was someone who was, not a big makeup person, or they didn't use a lot of skincare. They didn't grow up seeing someone doing this stuff, and they kind of feel like they missed out on the memo and they don't know where to start, and they're quite embarrassed. They're thinking, oh, I don't really know where to even begin. So what would you like to see them use?
So it's never too late to start to use a broad spectrum SPF product. And the reason is that the sun's UV rays are pro-inflammatory, pro-aging, pro-pigmentatory. Everything that you're probably trying to avoid is still going to continue to get worse, both short-term and long-term, by excessive exposure to the sun's UV rays. And in this country, we have quite a lot of obsession with the SPF factor. So the SPF is the multiple of time that you can spend in the sun when you're wearing this product versus going out in the sun without that product on before you burn. So, Shauna, you're from Northern Ireland. You have
the palest skin in the world.
You have a Fitzpatrick 5 skin, so Fitzpatrick's 2 skin, so you're quite fair. If you go out even at 10 in the morning, we could say that you would probably burn in 15 minutes. Even in Melbourne, even in Wisconsin, you could actually burn your skin. So we would say that if you're going to use an SPF 30, you could have 30 times 15 amount of time in the sun. So if your mass is as good as mine, we're now in the sun for 450 minutes, that's just quite a lot of time. It doesn't tell us anything about the sun's UVA for aging rays that are there from sun up to sundown, 365 days a year. And it doesn't tell us anything about the kind of ingredients we're using. So broadly, we speak about chemical or organic sunscreens or physical or inorganic sunscreens. And there are 2 physical or inorganic sunscreens, and they're titanium dioxide and zinc oxide. And zinc oxide is generally considered to be the safest, the least irritating. The thing about zinc oxide is it's often white and slimy, but I think recently there's been a rush to market of excellent, beautiful quality zinc oxide sunscreens that are even up to an SPF 50. I don't actually recommend anybody does go and sit in the sun for 3 or 4 hours. I think the guidelines are you retop that up every half an hour if you're going to sit in the sun. And quite honestly, I think there is no sunscreen that will protect you at that time of the day. Like, get into the shade, put a hat on, don't be out in the sun at that time. But if you really care about SPF, you can get an SPF 50 and you can actually stick that on your face. And I would say that a zinc sunscreen is probably a non-negotiable for everybody with potentially sensitive skin like peri and menopausal women. I really couldn't agree with you enough about the soap. We do want to cleanse the skin. Ideally, there are some toxins from the environment, from pollution. There's sweat, and a lot of people are allergic to or are very sensitive to sweat. So if you have sensitive skin, we want to get that off your face. And let's face it, we all use makeup as well. If you have rosacea, the guidelines are that you use a creamy cleanser with a pH of ideally 5.5 or below, so we're not disrupting your skin barrier further, only once a day. Now, they're the guidelines for rosacea. We don't have the same guidelines for generally sensitive skin, but I think that if that is you, then in the morning, if you have a shower, just put some water on your face and you're very sensitive, and at night, do a proper cleanse. I'm not a big fan of the double, triple cleanse with the serious
I
cleansers.
100% agree. My patients do an evening cleanse. We do a water splash in the morning because people feel like they want a bit of a freshen up.
Yes.
But that's all we do. I just feel like people are completely over cleansed.
Yeah.
But also, I just feel like it's basically a marketing trick because how to get people to use 3 times more cleanser.
And there is literally no data on cleansing twice or 3 times. There is for cleansing once. It's only for rosacea patients. But I do think it is there, exactly as you say. It's a nighttime cleanse, get your makeup off, and in the morning a splash of water with your on your face. And then in terms of your ingredients, there is from there no one size fits all. I think if you're really interested in building collagen and that is your biggest concern, then there is no bigger blockbuster than vitamin A. Vitamin A comes in a few forms. The form that you eat is retinol, so that's the form that you absorb into your stomach. In the skin, retinol needs to be converted to retinal, which is also known as retinaldehyde. And then from retinaldehyde, it has to be converted into retinoic acid, which you can get on prescription from your doctor. The problem is that even with young skin, because initially all the trials were done for acne, not for collagen growth, 60% of people have to abandon ship because it's so irritating, because tretinoin can be very, very irritating. And so people are given advice like, oh, just sandwich it between 2 layers of moisturiser. Well, now we've diluted it and I've got no evidence that that's going to work. Or they get told use it 3 times a week. Well, there have been no studies that have been done of using vitamin A 3 times a week. And if that's all you can tolerate, then I think that's a bit of a waste of time, because I can't tell you that that's actually going to grow collagen for you. Back to the other extreme of retinol. Retinol, it doesn't have any receptors in the skin. There are only retinoic acid receptors in the skin. There's none for retinal and none for retinol. And by the way, one step further away from retinol is retinol palmitate, RETNINYL, retinol palmitate. That's even further away from retinol. Retinol, because very little of it is converted to retinol, products need to put a very large amount into a product in the hope that some of it will escape into retinol. And the problem, that's where you run into the retinol burn. And again, if you've got sensitive skin, you're going to have to stop using it. And if you think there's no evidence for retinoic acid at 3 times a week, there's nothing for retinol 3 times a week. And we definitely don't want to be sandwiching it. Plus, the EU is bringing in at the end of 2024, the start of 2025, new regulations around the amount of retinol that's allowed to be in a product, and they're really restricting it to levels where it's basically ineffective. And so what I like is the sweet spot, which is Rationale, which is all the rage. Every time I go to a skin conference anywhere in the world, it's all anyone's talking about. And the reason why Rationale is so amazing is because in head-to-head trials where you look at one arm has retinol and the other arm has retinoic acid, they are identical in terms of their ability to help with skin cell turnover, renewal of collagen, even acne, things like that. But it's just not irritating. It sits in that sweet spot. So for menopausal women who have that sensitive skin, it is your absolute nirvana. Plus you can stick it in your moisturiser, so it's actually at the right concentrations without having to add a moisturiser on top. So I love Rationale. The big drama with Rationale is that we are sitting here in Australia, but it's about 30,000 Australian dollars, so probably closer to 20,000 US dollars per kilo, and it needs to be transported from the factory wherever it's made. And you can get some in China, you can also get some made in Europe. We use European Rationale, and we need to transport it from the factories in Europe to the factories in Australia where we actually manufacture all of our skincare at minus 20 degrees Celsius. We can't change the cold chain. Like, it has to be maintained at that. So that's why, because it's more expensive than gold, you're often looking at a product that is more expensive. Having said all of which, I certainly for ESK, our products are cheaper than a lot of the rubbish old school retinol products that are out there. So I actually think it's just a matter of being able to live with yourself when you're pricing up your products. But I think some people are nervous about retinol products because of the expense of the raw ingredients.
Yeah, but I have to say the results from them are, people see it.
Yep.
And there's sometimes skincare people they feel like they can't see it, but I do feel like you do see the difference.
Yeah.
Which is great. Okay, so that's vitamin A. Let's talk about vitamin B, niacinamide, B3, maybe B6. What are your thoughts on those?
B3, which is niacinamide, is one of those wonderful ingredients that has evidence. Like that, this is the whole thing with skincare. There are just a few ingredients that have evidence for a lot of different things. So you end up combining a very small number of ingredients, and most of the things that are advertised actually don't have any evidence at all. But when it comes to niacinamide, it has evidence for everything. Well, most importantly, it's a skin barrier builder. So along with panthenol, which is provitamin B5, but also ceramines, which we now know are a big part of that matrix, in that skin barrier, you can actually stick it in skincare and it is absorbed into the skin barrier and actually does repair the skin barrier. With those ingredients, you're going to rebuild your skin barrier. So if you are irritated and itchy, my first step after your sunscreen and only cleansing once a day with a creaming cleanser of a pH of 5.5 maximum, I would be adding in next your skin barrier builders, just because having irritated, dry, itchy skin is a nightmare. So niacinamide, the evidence really sits between 2 and 5%, and I've seen some 20% niacinamide serums and things like that. Just no evidence for that. They haven't been tried. I'm not saying it doesn't work. We just wouldn't know.
Yes, we don't know.
And some people report that it's a bit strong or a little bit too burny on their face. I also don't think niacinamide is one of those, it's the popular girl at school. She can play with anyone. She'll get in the sandbox and muck in with absolutely anybody. So don't have a separate niacinamide product. It should be in everything. Like niacinamide should be part of your sunscreen. It should be part of your vitamin A cream. It should be part of your depigmentation cream. Like whatever you're going to do, there'll be niacinamide in there. You don't need to have a separate niacinamide serum. In terms of, vitamin B5, so panthenol, best evidence is around wound healing, but also that skin barrier building. Actually, topical vitamin B6 and B12, we don't have a lot of evidence for those. They could be fine. We just haven't done really a lot of the studies yet. But I still think your A's and B's and your C's are really where the action, most of the action is.
Yeah. And what about moisturisers for women of this age? Because dry, everyone's dry.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a no-brainer, right? You are losing a lot of moisturisers, and there are different components to a moisturiser. You've got things like humectants that actually draw moisture into the skin, and they'll do that both from drawing moisture from the air into the skin, but also from the deeper layers into the skin. So you just got to be careful with a humectant that you're not actually going to be drying out the lower levels of the skin. So if you're going to just put on a straight hyaluronic acid serum, for example, HA is just a humectant. So it's lovely. It's a plumper temporarily, but it might dry out the skin. So we want to stick a moisturiser on top of it, right? So that's one of the things that we definitely want to be thinking about. But then you've got your emollients, and then you've got your occlusives. So your emollients actually bring moisture into the skin with the ingredients, and then the occlusives sit on top and stop any water escaping. So a lot of people are scared of occlusives because they think that they're going to break out with acne. If you are one of that 25% of women who are having a periacne breakout, or the 14% who are still getting regular breakout in their 50s, like that's a really interesting group of women. I'd be very careful around occlusives. For everyone else, I'm going to be really honest with you. Go to your local supermarket, grab a Vaseline. It's like £2. It's $5 in Australia. If you really want an occlusive, get the actives in your skincare and then chuck a Vaseline over the top if that's what you want to do. I think that's totally fine, and that is going to be one of the cheapest things that you can do for your skin.
Ginny, is there anything that you see repeatedly in your clinic that women are doing that you're like, no?
Oh, lots. Shall we talk about collagen powders?
Okay.
Where are you? I haven't ever asked you. Where are you at with collagen powders?
I just don't know. I feel like what is interesting to me is, one, I think the quality is very divided. I find that some patients think they're amazing and they'll say, my nails are amazing and my hair is stronger. And then other people are like, no, I haven't really seen anything that tells me that it's going to be helpful. I have to say I don't sort of push it, but I don't say don't do it. I'm kind of very open that if someone finds something helpful, it's unlikely to do them any harm, put it that way.
Most of the studies that have been done on collagen, so there are kind of 3 types roughly. There's collagen that comes out of a cow, bovine collagen. There's marine collagens that comes out of mollusks. And then there's vegan collagen where they actually insert genes from either a mollusk or a beef into a yeast and actually grow it. So I don't know if you really think that that's strictly vegan. If you're a really strict vegan, I don't know if it would be. All collagen is a series of 19 amino acids, whether it comes from a cow, whether you've made it yourself by your fibroblasts, or whether it's from a mollusk or from a yeast, they're all the same, these 19 amino acids, and in a chain. And when you eat food, the first thing that happens is it goes straight to the acid bath to knock off any bugs and stop you from getting food poisoning, we hope. The second thing that happens is you go into the first part of the small intestines where you will meet a plethora, an army of enzymes designed to break down every bit of food into its original components. So if it's a piece of bread, you're going to go into original mini glucose molecules. A big thing of fat, we're going to make it into fatty acids. And if you take a protein, whether it's collagen or a steak or egg or a glass of milk, you're going to break it down into its actual individual component amino acids. And then it'll go into the second half of the small intestines where those nice little small individual molecules will be able to be absorbed through your intestine into the bloodstream and then be a source for your cells to turn them into whatever it needs. If it goes near a muscle, it might be grabbed to be made into a muscle cell. If it's near a vagina, it'll go into a vaginal cell. And if it happens to be in your skin will have the recipe for human collagen. It doesn't have the recipe for bovine collagen or for muscle collagen. And so in the same way that you can't eat an egg and put an egg on your face, you can't eat bovine collagen and put bovine collagen on your face. That's not physically possible. Your genes can't make eggs and your genes can't make bovine collagen. So I've been really wondering about this. So if it's just biologically not plausible, like you could get those essential amino acids by having a steak, a bit of tofu and a glass of milk. Like you really don't need to be having these collagen powders. So what is it that gives the results? And Shauna, I think it's this. I do, as we both do, a lot of diet histories from our patients. And we know that in a premenopausal woman, just to maintain skin, nails, organs, you need 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. But the emerging evidence is that women who go through menopause because of some of the changes in our skeletal muscle, we rapidly lose skeletal muscle and bone tissue as we go through the menopause, that we need more protein. And we probably need but in some studies up to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. And women are not good at getting protein. And even though they've described this protein leverage effect where apparently we all start craving protein and wanting steaks, haven't really seen that in my patients, definitely not in me. I figure when I go out for dinner with a mixed group, I can watch the men pick the beef out of the stir fry and watch the women all pile up the rice onto their plates. We love our carbs. And we're not good at having our protein. And when I do a diet history, I very rarely get to see a woman who's even having her 0.8 ever grade.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you think an egg has 6 grams of protein, your latte has 6 grams of protein. If you have 2 eggs and a latte, what you would consider a super high protein breakfast, nobody has that. They have a Wheat Bix or
a piece of toast.
Or a piece of toast with no protein at all. But even if you're having that high protein breakfast, that's 18 grams. You're not there. And we also know that, like, for example, vegan proteins are not as well absorbed. We also know that it looks like you need to distribute your protein consumption throughout the day. You can't just have
load it all.
You can't load it all. You can't have 2 steaks at dinner and think that that's enough protein. So I think potentially the people who are putting a protein powder into a smoothie at breakfast or having it as part of a shake, maybe they're just upping their protein intake and maybe that's the contributor. And if that's what it is, all power to them. I'm actually quite happy with that.
Yes, yeah.
So I think it's a little bit like a Snickers bar. Like it's an ultra-processed food and I'd probably prefer you to get your protein from your meals.
So basically it sounds like mostly they're giving you a building block that potentially you're missing out on. And that's what I say to patients. It's not like you're swallowing this collagen and it's going like in a little bus to your face. Like it just doesn't work like
that. It's not biologically plausible and and that's good news because nobody wants to eat a tofu and then grow a big, lump of tempeh on their face either. So that's good news.
So one of the things I feel like the current era of women who are becoming perimenopausal, roughly, obviously there's younger and older, but we grew up with cleanse, tone, and moisturize. God, that Clinique toner that
I was a Clinique girl too.
That would strip paint off your face.
I know. And then we were told that if it burnt, that was a good thing.
Yeah, that's
doing good things for your skin.
So where are we with toner? It's not something that I have to say I use with patients, but people are very attached to toner, and I understand that because they've grown up with it. But what were we ever thinking with toner, and what on earth is it for? And is there anyone who needs a toner?
No. So a toner doesn't even have a definition. I think when you and I grew up with Clinique, because I had that yellow bar of soap followed by the blue alcohol toner,
and then by the
yellow moisturiser.
Even in Northern Ireland it was.
Yeah. So with all of that, the toner was just like an extra step, right? I think it was just an extra product. And it sort of come to mean a thin, watery product that you put on your face.
It was a bit burny.
Yes, and some people use it like they see all this brown come off on their cotton bud and they go, you see, the cleansing was not enough. You don't need that. That's going to dry out your face. But even the people who just have a bit of witch hazel or chamomile or, I don't know, whatever else is in there, you don't need that. That's just an extra step. And I see a lot of busy women, and my last interest is in making life difficult for them. I just don't think that's necessary. Omit the toner. While we're there, can we omit anything that scrubs the face? That's pro-inflammatory. That is pro-aging. That is pro-pigmentation. Like if you do anything that inflames your face, anything that burns and sizzles, we now know is not doing wonders for your skin. Nothing needs to do that. It's quite the opposite. If it is burning your face, it is causing inflammation. That is actually breaking down collagen. It is adding to your pigmentation. We do not want your face to burn and sizzle. So we definitely don't want scrubs. We don't want you taking your face washer to your face and scrubbing really hard. If your skin looks red after you've applied a skincare, it is not the skincare for you.
As someone who went straight from pregnant to menopausal very quickly, my skin really, really deteriorated quite rapidly. Now, I'd always had a sensitive skin, but my barrier function deteriorated and I developed really very obvious rosacea. And this is something that I see day after day in my clinic also. So many of you reached out and asked what I recommend and why. I have to say that since I opened my clinic, I've been using a brand called Rationale. They're an Australian brand that have been around for about 30 years. And what I absolutely love about Rationale is the products. They feel very luxurious, but they're extremely scientifically derived. And they've got these ingredients called skin identical formulations. All the ingredients, the minerals, the vitamins, everything that's included, the proteins, the lipids have all been found naturally within the human body, and therefore they're recognized by the body. So the ingredients are really, really well received. I find that menopausal skins and perimenopausal skins are dry, irritated, and sensitive. And with this range, I'm able to create a bespoke skincare plan for my patients. If you're interested in getting some of these amazing products, head to rationale.com and use the code YOU at checkout to receive some exciting bonus samples with your order. Okay, back to these trends. So the viral collagen overnight masks that seem to be absolutely massive. They're everywhere. There's dermatologists from the US with them on their faces. Are they a thing? Are they not a thing? What do you think?
So I think the collagen mask in and of itself is certainly something fun for patients to do. It's something that can confer short-term benefit. I think the biggest problem with it is its name. So it's called the collagen sheet mask. So automatically patients will assume that they're going to boost their collagen levels and they're going to have this wonderful long-term benefit from regular use of these masks. The thing to understand is that the collagen, they use sort of these hydrolyzed collagen molecules in the mask. They impregnate them with collagen as in addition to a whole lot of other ingredients, so niacinamide and various other products. But they're using the collagen there as a humectant, so something to draw moisture to the skin. So what happens is you put it on for whatever it is, 4 to 6 hours, then you peel it off. There are a number of things that will happen. One is that your skin is full of hydration. So it's very plump looking, it's beautifully smooth, and it's glowing. So you look fantastic after them. There's no doubt about that. The idea, however, that it's somehow going to stimulate your own collagen for a prolonged period of time is there's no science there, right? So it's all about short-term hydrating benefits, anti-inflammatory benefits, which, you know, in the long term is anti-aging, but mostly hydration. And I do think there's something to be said about that occlusivity that kind of really helps maximize how much hydration. And when you peel the mask off, you're getting a slightly exfoliating effect as well. So there's this kind of, you know, beautiful glow that you have after them. And if you want to, they're not terribly expensive. So I have no issue with patients, you know, doing that. But again, it's short-term benefit.
But it's not putting collagen into the skin, because that does not make sense.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. So another one that my daughter talked to me about was icing your skin. What's your thoughts on icing your skin?
Yeah, so again, this is something I spoke about on a television show called The House of Wellness, because it became really popular in COVID, and there were so many different TikTok videos about it. So again, it's this very ancient technique of simply applying something very, very cold to your skin, whether it's ice blocks, whether it's like the gua sha rollers, whether it's something that you've a mask that you've frozen. Icing will help cool the skin, and in cooling the skin, it's naturally anti-inflammatory and it's soothing. There are risks. You definitely don't want to apply ice neat to the skin and cause frostbite or, you know, a thermal injury through excessive cold. But it's going to help reduce swelling, and it will be, as I mentioned, anti-inflammatory. So it can be helpful, but again, temporary. You're not going to see long-term benefits for it. So I think if you're naturally someone whose skin is inflamed, is swollen, is upset or angry, applying anything cool to your skin will give you temporary relief, a reduction in swelling. But yeah, don't expect it to be giving you, you know, that beautiful glass skin long term.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. And what about those facial rollers that have got all the little pins or needles in them? I have to say I'm not a fan, but I would love to know what your opinion is on those.
Yeah, so again, I agree. So I think they're very well marketed. So derma rollers is one thing, and then you've got the actual sort of jade rollers, which is another. You see a lot of funny videos online with patients using those or people using them. I say proceed with caution, particularly with derma rolling. I think if your skin is sensitive, if you're using a variety of skincare actives, you can actually be causing a whole lot of inflammation by causing micro trauma to the skin through derma rollers, and expecting it to really help your skin, but it could be doing the opposite. So I think use it under medical guidance or with medical advice rather than just going out online and purchasing derma rollers. I think the jade rollers really do minimal, so I never recommend them. I think they're fun to do, but I can't see them actually.
It's maybe relaxing, but that's about
exactly.
it.
Yeah, nice little facial massage.
Ryan, I know that you're someone who's really at the forefront in dermatology. Is there any kind of new research that would be exciting to share? I don't know, on acne or rosacea or anything that you feel like is really going to really change the face of what we do with our skin?
I think there's new research coming out all the time that's super interesting. If you think about acne, where we're learning much more about the microbiome, which we talked about earlier, and the fact that there are not only Cutibacterium's acne, which is what the new name for P. acnes that everyone's heard about, but we know that various strains of Staphylococcus aureus or golden staph are very relevant. And this is where good skincare that can address the microbiome can be quite helpful. As you know, Shauna, we've got a lot of research now coming out in the benefit of particular lasers for acne. So 1726 nanometers is the wavelength that we know is very specific for the sebaceous gland. So we're using laser-based technology now based on good research to help clear acne without necessarily relying on old oral medications. So I think this is a really bright space. I think we're seeing a huge influx of good energy-based devices for skin where we've always relied on medicine. And I think we're seeing a change in the community where people don't necessarily want to take medicine anymore. They don't want to have to rely on pills every day. I certainly, if I were a patient, I'd be exactly the same. So I think it's nice to be able to provide patients with evidence-based therapies that don't rely on, older oral therapies.
And those newer therapies for acne, are they painful, or how do people tolerate it?
Yeah, so a lot of the lasers can be a little bit spicy, but it's all about having a really good pain protocol. So we have, at my own clinic, we very much encourage patients to take some Panadol and Nurofen before they come in. We can use topical anesthetic gels, and if really necessary, we can block nerves to help them kind of cope. But I think the vast majority of patients will say, look, it wasn't the most comfortable procedure, but I'm very happy with the results, and they'll do it again. And that's the most important thing, is that would they actually go through this process again for the results that they achieved? And overwhelmingly, the answer is yes.
I think you and I both know it's the psychological side effects of skin conditions are absolutely massive, and just seeing people's confidence both be absolutely destroyed, but then hopefully being rebuilt when you actually change their skin. It's quite remarkable.
Yes, it's probably one of the most rewarding things that I do, is seeing patients come in very upset, down, depressed or anxious because of their skin condition, and being able to help them on their journey, and then seeing the impact that it has not only on their confidence, but on their whole self-esteem and their personal and professional lives. It's so fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any new thinking around rosacea, or how do we have anything new in that space?
Look, I think there have been a number of therapies that have still been kind of in the works for this. So we know that the flushing and blushing patients are still an issue, and even laser's not perfect for that. And we've got a variety of products used topically that are available internationally, so in America and in Europe, that we don't quite have in Australia yet. So I won't talk about them just now, but I think we're slowly finding that there will be more and more products available for those patients who really flush and blush and find that their rosacea is difficult to get on top of. From a medical point of view, not a hell of a lot has changed. I think we're still treating people very similarly with sort of anti-inflammatory therapies for the time being, and we use a lot of very low-dose retinoids as well for them, and they usually respond very well.
So a lot of people come and ask me why, as they age, their face looks tired or sometimes looks a little sad. So a lot of you know me as a GP, and a lot of you also know me as an aesthetic medicine practitioner. So I've obviously got an interest in facial aesthetics. So I thought it'd be really helpful if I explained to you what's happening to your face as you age. Most people know that their skin is starting to feel a little bit thinner or saggier or wrinkly, but really the issue is so much more than skin deep. And I'm going to dive right to the further extreme in your body, and that's your bone. So you probably might be surprised to realize that actually, as you age, there are some pretty major structural changes that happen within your face, and you get quite predictable bone resorption from certain parts of your face. That is more extreme in some people. There's definitely a genetic element to it. If you don't have a great diet, or you're a smoker, or you have issues with your teeth and have had lots of teeth extracted, that's going to accelerate these changes in the structure of your face. But if we think about the eye area, the orbit or the eye socket, so the hole that your eye sits in, becomes much wider as you age. And that's one of the reasons why you will start to have that sort of dark, sunken, tired appearance. Sometimes it's absolutely nothing to do with tiredness. Sometimes a bad night's sleep is going to have made it worse, but sometimes it really is a structural issue. So if we think about the bone, you're losing bone across the cheek. The cheek becomes much flatter as we age, and therefore this is having an impact on the overall structure of the face. So again, as I said, we're not just talking about saggy, wrinkly skin. The actual structure underneath is sort of shrinking, for want of a better explanation. You also get a change around the jaw and the bones that are holding your teeth, and there's resorption there as well. So really, there's a lot of structural change, and you begin to see that on the outside. You can't really see it on the inside, but you see it on the outside when you're starting to get your jowls and you're starting to get this sunken eye appearance. Also, then the muscles in the face. We've got lots of muscles. Obviously, if you think about it, to be able to close your eyes, raise your eyebrows, to frown, to eat, to talk, there's muscles everywhere in your face. And as you age, those muscles, one, change in shape and size. They often become a little bit smaller, but also the balance of those muscles can become a little distorted. So often people will come to see me because they feel that their mouth is now turning down, and this because the muscle here in the face is actually becoming stronger. So instead of the mouth sitting in a nice neutral pattern, you're now getting this downturned mouth effect. And again, this is because there's changes within that muscle. Also within the face, you mightn't realize, but you've got these fat pads. And think of a baby, a nice chubby baby. They've got these really juicy, lovely fat pads in their face. They do say it's your fat pads that really help make you beautiful. As you age, those fat pads do shrink and get a lot thinner, but they also can slip and move within the face. And that also then contributes to that facial appearance. So again, if we go back to the eye area, that fat pad underneath the eye area can shift and change and give you an eye bag or make you look like you've got a very hollowed appearance. So really there's all these layers that are contributing to the facial changes that you're seeing in the mirror. And then of course, everyone's heard of collagen and elastin, and people are drinking collagen to try and improve the collagen in their skin. And what is this substance? Well, basically collagen and elastin are really like a fibrous network, for want of a better word, that actually give your skin structure. And that's what makes your skin, I suppose, taut. So think of, a baby or a teenager, they've got nice taut skin. And then as we begin to age, that all starts to loosen up because that structure becomes, or that network of fibers just becomes much looser. It's not as concentrated. And although in our bodies, things are constantly being laid down and reabsorbed in new cells all of the time, when we're younger, the resorption versus the laying down of new cells is pretty much at the same level. But as we age, the resorption phase seems to accelerate, and we're not very good at laying down the structures, the cells, the fibrous tissue, etc. that we need, and therefore we get this more saggy skin. So all of that said and done, we're then thinking about facial aging, thinking of multiple layers. So what's going on with the bone, what's going on with the muscle, what's going on with the fat, what's going on with the connective tissues, and then obviously what's going on in the skin itself. And obviously as you age, you're much more likely to have been subjected to lots of UV light. So your skin's going to start showing up those dark spots, sun damage, pigmentation. You're maybe going to develop skin cancers. You're going to be more likely to have had scars on your face. And you're going to have had lots of environmental damage, particularly if you live in somewhere like Australia or New Zealand, where you've got huge UV. And they say about 90% of aging is contributed to by that UV damage. Obviously, if you've got really good genes, if you look at your mum and dad or your grandparents and they've aged fantastically, then that's going to really stand you in good stead. There's definitely a real genetic element to aging, and you can often see that. I actually look after a few where I've got a 20-year-old patient, a 50-year-old mother, and then I've got the 70-year-old grandmother, and you can often really see those families who seem to age that bit better. You can do some things to help. Obviously, the main thing is protecting your face from UV. I'm always going on and telling everyone they have to wear a factor 50 plus sunscreen every day. One that's in your makeup or moisturizer usually isn't adequate, and you need to be reapplying in the middle of the day, particularly in the summer months. But that's because 90% of that aging of your face is related, or of your skin is related to that UV damage. And it's also never too late. It's still worth starting using sunscreen on a daily basis, even if you haven't for years. A healthy diet also is really important. We know that if you've got the right nutrients and you've got enough protein in your diet, then you're going to be able to lay down all those things that are really important. Having enough calcium and vitamin D, getting enough exercise is really important. Seeing the dentist regularly is really important. You don't want to just be thinking, oh, well, doesn't matter, I'll just get some pearly dentures, because the reality is that having your own teeth in their sockets is really important. for maintaining that structure of your face and making you not lose as much bone around that mouth area that can really begin to age. One of the other things that people get because of the bone resorption is that heaviness around the eyelids. So we do get a change in the bony structure over the eyebrow, and that angle changes, and then you get this sort of shifting of the skin, and that combined with changes in the skin laxity and some shrinkage and loss of muscle in the temples all contributed to that droopy eyelid look, which sometimes people need to have surgery for because it's actually impacting their vision. Particularly even when they're driving, they'll realize after they've had their surgery to fix their eyelids that actually, gosh, they weren't really seeing the peripheries very well at all. So in summary, facial aging, or if you're feeling like your face looks a bit sadder or that looks tired, it is because of lots of structural changes. It's not just that your skin's a bit old, it's that lots of things are changing beneath the surface. As I said, there are lifestyle things that you can do to help. Wear a hat, wear your sunscreen, etc., etc. But if all of those are still leaving you not feeling confident, then there are lots of treatments that you can go and have. I strongly encourage you to research your practitioner very, very thoroughly to make sure they know what they're doing. You want to have a really subtle result, so it looks really natural and you feel really confident. But there are definitely things that you can do. The other one last thing I want to mention is that in the perimenopause and menopause, the dropping hormone levels do accelerate this aging really across all the structures of the face. Estrogen really has an important role to play in bone, muscle, connective tissue, and even the hydration of the skin. So lots of menopausal women will notice quite a dramatic change. They feel like they literally aged overnight. And while it's not been quite an overnight process, there's definitely an accelerated phase of facial aging at this period of time. I hope this helps you understand what is actually going on in your face and why perhaps you don't maybe recognize the person in the mirror. And that also there are definitely things that can be done, but it is more than just usually popping a cream on your face, because the changes really are much deeper than your skin. That's not to say that great skincare doesn't help as well, of course. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. I do think that lots of people are very, very surprised when they realize just how much the skeleton of their face and the muscles and other layers of their face change as they age. And I hope this helps you make some informed decisions to make you feel more confident in how you look.
So I know that you talk a lot about the 6 pillars of skin health. Can you explain to me what those are and what you mean by that?
Sure. So we now know that 80% of facial aging is caused by the sun. And that means 2 things. It means, firstly, it's in our control. We can do something about it. Secondly, it means we know the cause. It's not a random, some people age poorly compared to others. It really is 80% of it's sun related. So I thought way back 35 plus years ago, what if we could prevent all this sun damage? So my first job out of college was working with a group of dermatologists who were using CO2 laser to basically vaporize the top layers off the skin, take away all that sun damage. But in doing that, they caused other problems. So the skin's immunity was damaged, and these patients were allergic to everything, including sunscreens, which they desperately needed. So that launched my study of the skin's immune system, the skin's antioxidant system, the skin's solar protection system. And I think of these things as systems. In medicine, we talk about systems in the body, and the skin has its own systems. And they're largely related to environmental protection. Skin is the only organ of the body that needs to deal with the physical environment as its outermost presentation. All the other organs of the body, as you know, are protected. The skin is very vulnerable. So in order to protect ourselves from the sun, we've evolved what I call the 6 systems, or the 6 pillars of skin health. And they are, in the morning, the skin's immune system is very active. That's the first. The second is we have an innate antioxidant system in our skin, and then we have a solar protection system. So they're the first three pillars of skin health. So in order to have a healthy skin, we have to have a healthy immune system, we have to have a healthy antioxidant system, we have to have a healthy skin solar protection system. At night, it changes. The skin's nocturnal rhythm looks more at things like barrier restoration. So our barrier repairs at night. pH recalibration is the fifth one. So every night, our skin tries to bring its pH back down to a healthy acidic level. And the sixth pillar of skin health is DNA repair. So our skin cells become damaged. They are capable to a certain extent of repairing themselves through this mechanism of DNA repair. The problem that we have, Shauna, is that we have not evolved, our skin systems have not evolved to support us much longer than, say, 35 years of age. So, one of my great interests, I have two great interests in this field. One is in epigenetics, which is the study, as you know, of the influence of the environment on our genetic tendencies. The second is evolutionary biology. So from an evolutionary point of view, our skin has not evolved to protect us much more than, say, about 35. And we're living twice, sometimes three times that now. So we do need help. So we developed these 6 pillars of skin health, 3 in the morning, 3 at night, designed to protect our skin from the sun during the day and repair sun damage at night.
Okay. And so how did you discover these, or what was it that made you pull this all together? Because the way you explain it is so good.
Well, just looking at skin in its state of optimal health. In medicine, we tend to study disease states, and there often, alarmingly or surprisingly, isn't a correlation to look back at what is the body doing when it's in a healthy state. We just look at a pathology and then develop a treatment around that instead of sometimes looking back and thinking, well, how does the body deal with this naturally? What went wrong? And skin is very much like that. We can see if what we're doing is working or not working with skin. And so way back in the early days when I was working with sun damaged patients and trying to treat them with lasers and various things, we saw the laser could definitely remove the damaged tissue, but the basic mechanisms of how to maintain skin health were still not there. And I realized we need to supplement these things. Now, supplementation is now quite a commonly held theory about human health. So, we take supplements for our brain or our kidneys or our liver or hormone replacement. All of these things are looking to put back what was there and is now not there. So my theory was that let's look at the skin in a state of optimal health. Oh, okay, so the skin has an immune system that revolves around B group vitamins. The skin has an antioxidant system, and that revolves around vitamins like vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin A, and so on. And then we have a solar protection system, which revolves around melanin, the amount of pigment we have in our skin, and our skin's barrier function. And in sun-damaged patients, all of those things are compromised. So I thought, what if we could create a system for human skin health that supplemented topically each of these things? Now, there's a lot of talk today about, taking collagen supplements and so on to enhance skin health, but the skin's a pretty direct organism. So the best way to treat the skin, and as we know in dermatology, is through the skin. So the idea of supplementing topically became, I guess, the foundation of what we now call the Essential Six.
I think that's really important. I often have patients ask me, well, can't I just take some vitamin B?
Yeah.
Can I just take a tablet? And I always explain, unfortunately, our bodies don't really give generously to the skin.
No.
And we don't prioritize, our body doesn't prioritize the skin as an organ like it would our kidney or our heart or our brain. And I often say to patients, if you think about it, if your heart physically aged in looks like your skin on your face did, we'd probably be in a lot of trouble.
We would.
And the reality is that's why we kind of have to feed our skin directly. Is that right?
Yes. And I think that, the skin is the only organ that has to deal with this external threat to its health. And as we become more prosperous and we're living longer, we're living more outdoors than ever.
Yeah.
So the challenge is doubly.
And so I know that you've been on quite a journey, and Rationale, your incredible company, is very much at the forefront of research. What would you say is the most sort of powerful or most exciting discovery that you've made in your career?
I think there are two. The first discovery is that 80% of facial aging is caused by the sun. And that's a message I think that's very empowering, because it means it's in your hands. The most important thing is don't get burned. If you're a parent, don't let your children get burnt, because we know the number of sunburns correlates to how we're going to age, but also skin cancer. So I think that message of 80% of facial aging is preventable if we do all the right things and don't do the wrong things. The second one is another important area of research for Rationale, and that is what's called epigenetics. So we know that we have our genetic code that we inherit from both parents, and that influences many areas of our health and happiness today. For example, mental health, there is a genetic component we know. It's certainly cardiac disease and so on. So epigenetics has changed the way we see that genetic code. When I was a student, we were taught your genetic code is immutable, you can't change it, whatever is in your genetic code will be expressed. Now we know different. So we know that if we do the right things and stop doing the wrong things, that tendency might not be expressed. For example, I come from a family of 7, and all of my siblings have had and both my parents have had multiple skin cancers removed. I've been doing what I've done since I was in my early 20s. I haven't a single skin cancer, nothing. Never happened. And I mean, that's a sample of one, but it is relevant because I think this whole thing about taking it into your own hands. So epigenetics means if we protect our skin immune system, use antioxidants, use a sunscreen every day and so on, follow those 6 principles of skin health, the chances of negative expression of genes like skin cancer or premature photoaging and so on are greatly diminished, enormous. And I think that's a message of hope. I think it's the one thing I hope I've contributed to the medical literature over the years is that skin health is very much in our own hands.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a really interesting study that they did in Massachusetts about 6 years ago, and they used some erbium and CO2 laser on skin, and they divided a group of men who'd had non-melanoma skin cancers into 2 groups, and one got treated with laser to kind of reboot the skin and the other didn't, and then they followed them for the next 6 years. And it was very interesting because the group who were treated with that laser actually had 50% less non-melanoma skin cancers. Yeah. And so I think what it does say is that actually the health of the skin and the skin cells actually can be improved by external forces as well, which is so interesting
and encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is that interest in skincare and skin is just through the roof. I actually looked at the Google Trends, and it is something like quadrupled in 10 years, the number of searches.
Yes.
I wanted to change tack slightly. Obviously, more and more patients are getting interested in lifestyle medicine and disease prevention and, how they can impact their health through their lifestyle. How do you think that sort of overlaps with dermatology? What things would you like to see patients doing so that they have better skin health?
Well, yeah, there's no better discipline in the world than dermatology for saying what you should do to stop getting disease. Apparently, there's this little yellow ball in the sky that people have talked about that comes up at dawn and goes to bed at nighttime. I think it's called something, but in Australia and the rest of the world, you've just got to avoid that. I mean, it is a love-hate relationship. I hate this thing about vitamin D, Vitamin D is pretty safe out of a bottle, but we're crappy at producing vitamin D from sun exposure. And in my age group, you just don't do it anymore. Like it's not, the enzymes just aren't turn aroundable. So you just don't, it's a useless way of doing it. And for example, the 15 minutes 3 times a week people talk about is enough to produce vitamin D. It might be in a 20-year-old, but let's examine that. 15 minutes 3 times a week has also been shown to turn off your ability to break down what's called matrix metalloproteinases, which in your skin dissolve your collagen. So if you use 15 minutes of sunshine, UVA content gets through that into your dermis is enough to stop your defenses against breaking down your collagen. So already you're on a hard to nothing. And that's obviously a minimum, and we're doing plenty more than that. So prevention. So sunshine is definitely part of it. Skincare is part of it. No, skincare which I used to poo like everybody else did 20 odd years ago. Or maybe 30 years ago. I think I started producing skincare about 20 years ago. It's there. Antioxidants definitely have got plenty of legacy and a story to tell with relate to preventive skin disease, because we don't produce much in the way of antioxidants ourselves. Orally, we should be taking them. Topically, we should be using them, because our antioxidant reserve is depleted by sunshine, it's depleted by pollution. It's depleted by cellular respiration. It's depleted by what we eat. So, we produce toxic substances from oxygen all the time. We breathe, not allowed to do that. So we breathe, we eat, we produce toxic substances from the Krebs cycle and breaking down your food and from direct effect of UVA and UVB and even infrared light. So you have all these things producing issues with the oxidative stress, and you've only got this poor old glutathione pathway that's not up to scratch, and you need a supplement. So definitely antioxidants. And then you've got vitamin A, which is, every Australian skin is deficient in vitamin A virtually. So, that's where, retinoic acid comes into its own for repair. So repair is really important. And vitamin A normalizes your tissues, makes things that didn't look like they were able to be repaired. As far as the photo damage goes, as far as your skin damage goes in generally. And then you've got more specific things that are coming on board, like DNA repair enzymes, telomere protectors, things that actually reverse the damage that is done on a daily basis to repair. So skincare is getting more and more important, and that doesn't even include peptides and stem cells and growth factors and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And just bringing it back to nutraceuticals as well, you really want to be eating well. And the reason that we don't like fruit that's gone off or vegetables that are past their date is that we're looking for antioxidants in vegetables, and antioxidants are at their highest when the fruit is the correct color. And so we look for that in foods. Obviously, diet and certain skin conditions is important as well. Rosacea has a definite diet relation. Acne, a little bit less, but if you eat like a Big Mac, you tend to look like a Big Mac. So you want to make sure that you're eating non-processed foods for acne in particular, low GI index foods. Psoriasis, it's been thought that polyunsaturated fatty acids rather than saturated fatty acids tend to make a difference in an oxidative tendon pathway, but probably not as much as we'd like. And even eczema, to do with the gut and various things you can do. So there are plenty of things that you can do in a preventive role. You can do treatments in a preventive role. There's a whole raft. Patrick Bitter Jr.'s thing about Forever Young. He does a yearly IPL and thinks that makes sure that he's okay. With photodynamic therapy nowadays for skin disease, you can literally do a what's called a daylight PDT, put a photosensitizer on your skin, sunscreen, and go outside for 2 hours to push back all your sun damage, and do that on a yearly basis to prevent further skin cancers and sunspots. There are oodles of things you can do to prevent or decrease skin disease, but in general terms, maintaining health is what that's all about, really. So that's just a few things, but I'm sure I could go on for that very well.
Whenever I first moved here 11 years ago, I have to admit that I did think that people looked a bit older than their biological age. And I have always felt that Australia have done a pretty good job of convincing people to wear sunscreen for cancer prevention. But I often wonder why people are very motivated to look younger, and yet it seems like lots of patients come to see me, and I'm sure they do to you too, and they've actually got quite complex skin regimes of lots of products, but they're often reluctant to wear sunscreen. And I just wonder why the message hasn't quite maybe got out there quite as well about how aging the sun actually is.
In 2018, Catherine Armour, myself, and a couple of co-authors wrote a paper, which is well worth looking at, I reckon, even though it's our paper, on the difference in facial aging in females. Wasn't meant to be genderist, just happened to be females. I criticised because I was talking about this on the ABC. And it showed that Australian women aged 10 to 20 years faster than their US UK and Canadian counterparts, especially the US, strangely enough. And that's where this temperate climate thing comes in, which I'll go back to now. We looked at lines. So we looked at nasolabial lines, crow's feet, forehead lines, glabella, frown lines, marionettes. And we looked at volume loss as well. So mid-face volume, cheek volume, marionette area. They didn't just age 10 to 20 years faster in the lines that they've got. They averaged 10 to 20 years faster in the volume loss that they got. And that was astounding to us because we were asking ourselves, why would this be? What is that about? And it wasn't because they were thinner, because in fact the Australians were the most obese in the study. But it seemed to be that the sun was actually dissolving their volume. And so we looked at that a little bit and we came to the conclusion that it's not the UVB, probably not even UVA, it might be a little bit of UVA, but it's the other wavelengths, just the infrared, it's the microwave, it's all the other things that come from the sun. And if you look at the fat dissolving equipment we use, there's been 10,060 nanometer lasers, which are just very short infrared. We get plenty of that. There's been obviously 1064 and there's been kind of longer wavelengths, radio waves and radio frequency and microwaves and that sort of thing, and they all get here. And so we think that it's because of the same issue, because we are out in the sun all the time, and sunscreens probably don't help that much for volume because they're just UVB blockers and a little bit of UVA. They're not really stopping your deeper wavelengths, which are probably the ones that get down to the fat. And so we're at a height to nothing. So again, you really have to go back to not only the sunscreens, but you've got to go back to not just the the slip, slop, slap. You've got to be doing the slip and the slap. You've got to be able to make sure you're clothing up and you're wearing hats and you're doing all the avoidance and that sort of thing, rather than necessarily relying. I think we're relying too much a little bit on sunscreen in Australia. Our sunscreen use in Australia is actually quite high in the study. It's just as high as anybody else. But I do take the point that it seems to be absent from a lot of people. And, the problem with sunscreens, they've been on the nose lately. This is, again, social media terrible, but So, yes, some sunscreen's been banned in the United States because they've gone overboard and gone ridiculous about marine biology and things like that. And, I don't want to kill any whales either. But, in Australia, nobody's died of a sunscreen.
And what about zinc-based sunscreens? Are they any better in terms of, penetration of other rays, not just UVA and UVB?
No, not really. No, some of the chemical sunscreens are probably better than the organic ones as far as the length into UVA that they range. And the mixed sunscreens are probably best of all. But zinc is okay, and titanium dioxide is okay, but titanium dioxide has been on the nose lately, and especially nanoparticle titanium dioxide. But you can't keep up with what's on the nose. It's hard to work out what you're up with trying to be correct in this area. But I think sunscreens, as far as I know, have saved many lives and wasted none. So I think sunscreens are imperative, but keeping out of the sun is probably important.
Today I want to talk about a problem that I see very, very frequently in all of my clinics, and it's a skin condition that seems to really impact people's self-esteem and their sense of well-being. And in the more serious level, it can lead to people feeling quite anxious and depressed about their skin. So that problem is rosacea. And sometimes people are a little bit confused as to what rosacea is. There's obviously lots of levels of rosacea, but in really simple terms, if you've got persistent redness of your cheeks or nose or chin and forehead, usually always the cheeks and nose, but sometimes the chin and forehead are also involved, then I think it's worth pursuing and seeing whether you actually have rosacea. And that persistent erythema can actually be uncomfortable at times. You can end up with lots of broken blood vessels on your face that are perhaps make you self-conscious. Some people will also have pustules, which are like little pussy spots on their face. And some people will also have sort of papules, which are sort of little lumps or spots under the skin that don't really come into a head, but can be quite uncomfortable as well. With rosacea, you can have a type of rosacea that's also impacting your eyes. And sometimes I see patients, they've got very red, dry eyes. They tend to have a propensity to getting styes around their eyes. And that actually can also be related to them having rosacea. And what I find is that people with rosacea, particularly on that moderate to severe end, are often spending a lot of time and effort researching their skin, buying a lot of skincare products, and trying lots of different thick creams to try and hide or disguise their makeup, often using camouflage creams under thick foundations. And often people really feel absolutely at the end of their tether. If you have a little look at your family members, if you've got rosacea, you'll often find that either your mum or dad or your grandparents or an auntie or someone has a very similar condition. And we know that rosacea has a strong genetic element to it. We know that rosacea is actually what's called a multifactorial disorder, in that there seems to be a lot of different things at play. We know that people of Celtic origin, like myself, or people of Northern European descent seem to be much more likely to have rosacea. However, what I will say is that darker skinned individuals can also have rosacea, and it may well be that just some of the symptoms are not as readily visible on their faces, and therefore at times we may have underestimated how many of them actually have rosacea. Rosacea commonly occurs around the ages of 30 to 50, but there are definitely lots of patients of mine who are a lot younger than that when they first develop symptoms. And I have some patients who'll even show me photos of themselves as a preteen or teenager who already were developing those very red, flushed cheeks. One of the other things that people with rosacea often complain about is that they tend to flush and get very embarrassed easily, and that leads to a bit of a vicious circle. So they're already feeling a bit self-conscious about their red cheeks, and then someone says something, or they're feeling nervous or anxious, and they'll get a full flush of their face, neck, chest, and it all looks very, very red, and that leads to people feeling quite embarrassed in social situations. Now, there's lots of research going on to try and understand what is at the bottom of rosacea and what the causes are. And because quite a substantial number of people actually have the condition. Depending on the population you look at, it's anything from 5 to about 12% of the population struggle with rosacea. So that's a very sizable number of people. And what we know, as I said earlier, is there is a strong genetic element, and we're trying to understand why that is. But we know that there seems to be some type of immune dysregulation. There seems to be inflammatory pathways involved, and there also seems to be this real genetic susceptibility that's passed through families. Whenever I approach someone with rosacea, obviously I like to do it with lots of compassion and understanding, and I think I can do that especially because I personally have rosacea as well, and I can understand how challenging it can be. We do need to come at rosacea with lots of changes in lifestyle, because unfortunately we know things like lots of sunlight make it worse. So a physical sunscreen with some zinc in it and a hat are definitely a must. We know that alcohol seems to make it worse, and for a lot of people, red wine specifically seems to make it worse. And we also know that certain foods, specifically spicy foods, seem to be really challenging. So foods with like lots of chili and things in it are going to make your skin flush. We also find that people with rosacea have a very barrier impaired skin, and therefore they will often complain that lots of things make their skin sensitive or sore. So they are often quite frightened of trying new skin products because they know that things are going to flare their skin up. And that's because the skin barrier is not functioning like we'd like it to. In the approach to rosacea, as I said, we talk a lot about what you can do at home. And then we have to think about things that we might have to prescribe for you for rosacea. We know that there seems to be an immune linkage where you get this immune activation in the skin. It is quite a complicated phenomenon, so I'm not going to get into too many details, but basically we have various bacteria and organisms that live in our skin, including something called the dermadex mite, and we know that there seems to be an increased sensitivity and population on patients who have rosacea. So some of the treatments that we use for rosacea include oral or topical antibiotics and topical treatments such as ivermectin, which is basically an antiparasitic that can be used on the skin to reduce the severity of rosacea. However, there's no creams or lotions or potions that are actually going to reverse all those little broken blood vessels that you have on your cheeks. And that has to be approached using a specific type of laser. And I have to say, it can be really, really satisfying to treat and get people some control of their rosacea. I do always tell patients that at this stage, unfortunately, while the research continues, there is no cure for the rosacea, and I definitely can't cure it for them, but what we can do is get a little bit of control back under the skin, and that feels extremely satisfying for anyone with rosacea, because they feel that their skin is quite out of control and they feel often quite depressed and distressed that no matter what they try, things just seem to be getting worse. So I hope this video today has been helpful. Hopefully some people maybe are recognizing some of the symptoms in themselves. You don't have to persevere. It's definitely something that can be managed, and I can almost guarantee you that it can look a lot better than it does right now. You just need to obviously find someone who can guide you and support you in making the lifestyle changes that you need to make, prescribe you what you need to have prescribed, and facilitate whatever laser treatments or whatever may be beneficial for you.
So what I'd like to talk about a little bit now is another interest of yours, which is basically the gut microbiome and nutrition. So I wonder if we can do a little segue. I mean, it's still connected, yes, because we know that there is a change in the gut microbiome at this time as well.
There is.
So it's still all connected, but I'd love to ask if you mind if we kind of start to talk a little bit about that gut health. So first of all, what do we know changes in the gut microbiome? I know it's a very sort of evolving field, and I know there's lots of research, particularly in the UK, seem to be absolutely fabulous at this research. But what do we know about the gut microbiome generally, and then what do we know is happening in the peri and postmenopausal period?
So, and it's so good that we're now talking about the gut microbiome. And when we refer to that, we're talking once again about these tens of trillions of microorganisms, but the studies have mainly been done on bacteria, because that tends to be the group of these bacteria that most impacts our health and drives disease. And we very loosely refer to them as beneficial or potentially, we call them good and bad, but it's beneficial or opportunistic. And they all live together. They cohabit mainly in the lower colon, but right through the gut, which is really the gastrointestinal tract that starts from the esophagus and ends at the back passage, we have got microorganisms, but the majority of them are found in the large colon. And they are very much affected by lifestyle, by medication, by stress levels, but most importantly by diet. And we know that the beneficial bacteria, in order for them to thrive, need fiber. And this is fiber that comes from fruit and vegetables. That's the best source of fiber, because they break down this fiber to make these metabolites that we call short-chain fatty acids. And these short-chain fatty acids have a systemically anti-inflammatory effect. Keep the gut nice and non-inflamed, but also spill out via the bloodstream and affect, organs at, distant sites. When a diet is not high in fiber, unfortunately, their numbers deplete. But then you have this other group waiting in the wings, these opportunistic ones. If you're not eating fiber, if you're not eating fruit and veg, what are you eating? It tends to be ultra-processed food a lot of the times. And so for people who consume a diet that is highly processed, where there's not a lot of fiber, you are encouraging the growth of these other bacteria. And unfortunately, they drive inflammation. They produce these inflammatory molecules, which include lipopolysaccharides, that cause the gut lining to become leaky. Now, the gut lining is only one cell layer thick. And so as the little joins pull apart, you've got these inflammatory molecules that leave the gut, and via the bloodstream, we have associated them with dementia risk, with arthritis, with osteoporosis, with inflamed skin, right, with mood swings, etc. So the gut bacteria are important mainly because in the gut we have 70% of our immune cells living, and the gut bacteria educate our immune system. So if you've got the wrong ones in the majority, we now associate that with the rise in autoimmune conditions. So really, really important. Gut bacteria are also important for regulating hormones, for regulating bowel movement, for keeping weight down. So the gut bacteria play a very, very important role. Now, in menopause, lots of things change, including the makeup of the bacteria. So there's a big shift in the gut microbiome composition as well as diversity. Now, in order for us to be healthy, we need to have not only a nice, robust immune system, but we have got to have a diverse microbiota, which changes in menopause. So if we then are not eating foods that are rich in fiber, we start to notice that things start to change. You might have been someone who had always been able to control her weight, and now in menopause, that changes, because in menopause, our metabolism takes a dive. The gut bacteria that are responsible for helping to regulate our weight change. So weight gain happens, especially that centroadiposity. Our sleep is affected. Moods change. And these are all linked to the health of the gut bacteria. There was a big study that came out 2 years ago on World Menopause Day in 2022 called the Zoe Predict study. Yes, and it showed all those things that with menopause, there's hypercholesterolemia, there's dyslipidemia, there's changes in sleep, all of the things that we know happen that menopausal women complain of, this study showed. Largest nutritional study of its kind, a collaboration between King's College London and T.H. Chan School of Public Health and University of Massachusetts were involved in this study. And their point was menopausal women can no longer eat diets that are ultra-processed because the body cannot process it anymore. Without you changing your diet, you now have insulin resistance occur as a result of moving into this life phase. So there are some really dramatic changes that have to happen. When you talked about cardiovascular disease being the number one killer, cholesterol levels increase without you changing your diet.
The number of women who are so upset and frustrated by that when I, check their bloods and people understandably, they feel defensive. Yeah. They're like, but I've always had a cholesterol of 4. I don't understand. I'm not doing anything differently. The number of women who come in to see me in tears because they're people who probably have controlled their weight their whole life. And they're like, I am not eating anything differently. These women are sometimes going actually to the gym way too much because they are trying so hard and they just do not understand what is going wrong.
Which makes inflammation worse.
Yeah, and of course, we're just in this vicious circle. So the whole weight thing's very interesting. I did read a couple of I love that group, Zoe. I love that podcast. Anyone listening, it's a great podcast on nutrition.
Yes.
But I read an interesting study that they, in really simple terms, they took some gut microbiome secretions from some people who had obesity and they transferred them. It was a mice study, and they didn't change the amount of food that the mice were allowed to have. And within, I think, 6 weeks, the mice who had this changed gut microbiome were all overweight, despite still only having access to the same food.
Which points to the fact that you've got these obesogenic bacteria.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's very interesting, but I think for years, people have been made to feel bad about not being able to control their weight or been made to feel guilty or made to feel that they're lazy or they don't have enough motivation. But I think we're going to look back in 10 or 15 years and realize that we've had a very oversimplified idea around obesity and weight. And I think that it is much more complicated than actually we believe.
Absolutely.
If it was so easy,
Why it's so hard?
Why is it so hard, really?
And even the talk, did you attend the talk on the last day of the World Menopause Congress? When Deakin, I can't remember his name, Deakin University researcher was talking about obesity and how it's nobody's fault. You know, you've got obviously that genetic component, but he was saying that we still don't know. No.
Well, I think the really interesting thing for me on obesity is the introduction of the GLP-1 drugs. I think what's really interesting, so that's the Ozempics, the Wegovys, the Mounjaros, all of those. And, you know, again, for years, I think we've made people feel really guilty that only if they could just try a little harder to lose weight, or if only they could be a bit more motivated, they would lose weight. But whenever we inject people with a GLP-1, we're not injecting them with motivation. We're not injecting them with willpower, and yet people lose phenomenal amounts of weight. And so I just think it's so time for everyone to stop laying on the guilt on people.
And stop the blaming, stop the judgment, I think. Yeah. I'm actually in February, I start a PhD looking at the effects of personalized nutrition, exercise and coaching on the cardiometabolic health of postmenopausal women. That's in Feb I start.
That's amazing.
And I'm doing it because, for this same reason, women are struggling to work out how to get their weight under control. Yes, you've got all of these new drugs that have come out and they're miracle workers, but they're not for everybody. And there are some side effects from them that need to be considered. But personalized nutrition is a passion of mine because no two people are the same. And so to say to someone, you've got to calorie restrict, it doesn't work. But if you look at a group of blood values, including C-reactive protein, looking at your liver enzymes, etc., there's actually a company in Germany we send the blood results to, and they come back with a food list, just a list of food that is individualized to each person. And they follow this list of foods, you know, make their 3 meals. There is some time restriction in between, and their health profile changes. And we don't focus on weight. We focus on getting you healthy, optimizing your health, getting your markers back into balance, back into range. And the weight will fall off, but that's not the focus. And so I think that that's the sort of thing that we need to see more research in, which is why I'm doing this PhD, because we have wonderful results. I don't believe anyone can lose weight if you calorie restrict, but it's about keeping it off, but also doing it in a healthy way. Because with that calorie restriction, if they say 1,200 calories, you can make up, you know, that 1,200 from sugary foods if you choose to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas it really needs to be focused on gut supportive foods, lots of fiber, you know, a bit of fruit, healthy fat, good sources of protein. So yes, I'm also just with the GLP-1 inhibitors, I don't want it to be a quick fix, that people sort of don't make those changes that need to be made with their relationship with food and understanding that food really is fuel.
Skin quality is probably the most prominent trend we're seeing. How do you convey the injectables and the toxins, and how do you convey that to skin quality in your practice?
Hi, Jai. Thank you for that great question. So at our clinic, skin comes first every single time. And I'll tell you a story of why I think that's so important. A number of years ago, before I embarked on any kind of a journey into aesthetics, I remember really clearly a patient coming to see me in my GP practice. As soon as she came through the door, within probably 30 seconds, she started to cry. And it took a long time for her to calm down a lot. And in my mind, I started to think about why was she so upset, because she really could not speak for crying. And
actually it turned out that she had gone and had some lip filler done, or had her lips done, as it's colloquially known, and she was really upset about the result. But while she was crying, I was thinking that she was crying about her skin, because she actually had really very severe acne all over her face. And whenever we got down to the nuts of what was wrong, and bearing in mind at this stage, this is more than 10 years ago, I did not work in aesthetics. The bottom line was that she was really disappointed in getting her lips done, because she had perceived that if she only had bigger, fuller lips, that she was going to be more confident. But the reality is that confidence is so much more than one feature. And also the other reality was that actually her skin was not great at all. She had very severe acne. And if anything, probably having her lips done nearly drew more attention to the center of her face and made her even more self-conscious. And she came to see me because she had got very depressed and had barely left the house for 6 to 8 weeks. And whenever she did leave the house, she felt that everyone was looking at her. And it's always stuck with me, that, and it's one of the reasons, as I've said, that at my clinic, skin always comes first. And it's not obviously just that story, it's because it's what I believe that you should do. I believe that we should give people the confidence to be confident, quite literally in that phrase, the skin they're in. So be confident in the skin you're in. And the only way that you're going to achieve that is that if you've got healthy skin. And I think that healthy skin gives people an air of confidence that really nothing else does in terms of cosmetic treatments. I think if people feel like their skin looks well hydrated, it's got a glow about it, it's got a healthy color, then that is what's going to make people feel much more confident than whether you erase all their wrinkles or you change or augment their features. So at our clinic, whenever anyone comes to see us, we show that that's really important to us, because the vast majority of the first bit of the consultation is really all spent on not only exploring your general health, but your skin health. And we do a number of special types of skin analysis that will really let us see what the health of your skin looks like. And obviously, we're going to ask really in-depth questions around that. And I do believe that it's worth spending a couple of months, sometimes even longer, helping someone with their rosacea or their acne or their pigmentation or their melasma or whatever the skin condition might be, before you ever embark upon having treatments that sort of fall under the umbrella maybe of anti-aging or cosmetic enhancement, because I think that you need to have those foundations in place. And the reality is that if you also have a really healthy skin, then those treatments are going to work better. They're going to look better. The result's going to be better. It's probably going to last longer as well. I always explain to patients, if you've got, for example, a really dry skin, an analogy might be that if you had a really dry, old brown leaf that's dried out and you kept squishing it or folding it in your hand, well, that leaf is going to crack and break into bits probably and fall on the ground. But if you had a really nice lush green leaf that was full of hydration and you scrumpled that leaf up in your hand and then you opened your hand up again, it's actually very likely that that leaf would spring back into a reasonable shape. And if you think about your skin like that, I know it's a really simple analogy, but if you've got skin that's got good nutrition, good hydration, it's being protected from the elements, then it's highly likely that whenever you squint in the sun or you raise your eyebrows or you frown, you're much less likely to create a very deep line in the skin than if you had skin that was really dry and unhealthy. I think the other reason that for me skin is first is the reality is that a lot of the patients I see, they're often women, often in their middle age. One of the reasons they'll come to see me is because their confidence is dipping. They're not feeling like they recognize themselves in the mirror, but they're often quite fearful of looking a little bit strange or looking like they've had something done. They want to look very natural. They don't want anyone to know that they've had anything done because they're very, very worried about those stereotypical duck lips and things that we see on Instagram. And so another reason that I will really focus on skin in these patients is you can actually improve someone's appearance really very dramatically just by evening up their skin tone. So as we age, we often start to throw red and brown discoloration onto our face. And in Australia, that is a massive thing. The sun damage here it just has to be seen to be believed. And it really, really does age a person. And if you actually even up someone's skin tone and you don't do anything else at all, you just improve their skin and you even up that skin tone by reducing some of the brown spots and some of the redness, it really, really literally shaves years off people's appearance. And then sometimes they feel like they don't even need to do anything else. That is why at You by Dr. Shauna Watts, skin always comes first, long before I ever navigate people down a pathway with injectables or other treatments, because I believe if you do skin first, you're going to get a much better result. So one of the commonest questions that I've got asked since we've begun recording podcasts are, what do I do with myself at my clinics, apart from when I'm working as a GP in my GP clinic? So at my clinics that are called You by Dr. Shauna Watts, the clinic is centered around you, and it's all about making everyone who comes, but that's mostly middle-aged women, feel more confident and to help people navigate what I find is the overly complicated world of skincare. No one knows where to start, what's real, what's not, what's going to help, what's not. Various treatments in terms of wrinkles and skin laxity and skin tightening and pigmentation and discoloration and what they should have and whether it'll help them. So basically my role in that is to create a bit of a plan and a journey for you to get you to the point where you're back feeling confident and healthy and happy in the skin you're in. The clinics are based on the Central Coast and in Newcastle, and we would love for you to come and visit us and have a no obligation consultation to see where that journey might take you. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or other professional advice. Information is provided for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you have any health concerns, always consult your doctor.